All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. As you do, as folks come in, Jonna, if you wouldn't mind just kind of muting them too as we go through, and then we'll open it up for questions too. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again for joining us today for the Capital Projects Fund onboarding webinar. A lot of you are returning grantees, so some of this stuff is going to be basically a refresher for you all. I do want to point out that, as you all may already know, this is a separate assistance listing, so the different CFDA number entirely from the State Fiscal Recovery Fund. So I just wanted to point that out as we go through there. So some of these things will be a little bit different, not much, but just wanted to point that out. I'm Jen Wade. I'm the Grants Division Director. You can all see Jonna on screen right now. She's our Grants Manager at OPB. And we've got David Luker from RSM. They are our third-party auditors and also our partners in a lot of our infrastructure projects. So we're happy to have him on as well to answer a lot of your questions that you may have on the compliance side, procurement, et cetera. I just wanted to point out we do have post-award FAQs online. We are in the middle of updating those right now with our legal team, and then to separate them out for specific projects to make sure that you do understand the differences between broadband and capital projects. So we hope to have those posted up next week for you all. So you can find those on our For Grantees website, which we'll reference very often throughout the webinar. We're just kind of going to go through, again, the guidance on capital projects, the uniform requirements and the uniform guidance that are under the assistance listing for this capital projects fund award. And then at the very end, too, you'll see additional resources, which capital projects funds has a different compliance supplement, has a different compliance and reporting guide, which those of you who do have state fiscal recovery funds, you're used to seeing us kind of point you to that for state fiscal recovery funds for reporting and compliance, and they have their own separate one for capital project funds. Today, we're just going to walk you through, again, complying with the federal requirements, the resources that you guys are going to need, the next steps in the award process, where to find your grant documents and things like that, all the available resources you have between our office and our auditors, and as well as, you know, submitting the budget and things like that, and then the audit requirements. We're going to go through, again, just the next steps, and we've kind of listed them all here. They're also on our website, and we'll show you kind of what that looks like, and we're going to go through them in a fair amount of detail. I feel like this onboarding webinar could really take 2 hours just because there's so much. So I'm not going to read you every single slide. There's a lot of information that goes into federal grants. So just making sure that, you know, you take away the key points of this, and then you go and make sure that, you know, as the subrecipient, you are taking a look through the guidance, you're understanding the uniform guidance and, you know, what applies to the program, et cetera. We just don't have enough time, you know, to go over every single thing word for word. The reporting, hey guys, if you just joined us, if you could mute. Thanks, guys. Reporting requirements, again, will slightly vary from your state fiscal recovery fund. We know it's a little bit of an administrative headache, but we want to make sure that you guys know where to find that, and then the audits again. All right, perfect. So the capital project fund, just like the state fiscal recovery fund broadband, is for broadband infrastructure projects that reliably meet or exceed the download and upload speeds of 100 megabits per second. Many of this, you know, you already know all this from the NOFO and from applying, but I wanted to highlight your period of performance. It is the date of the signed terms and conditions agreement, which is December 31st, 2026. And while it is, you're allowed costs that are incurred during that time, I just wanted to point out that even though those costs are at the beginning of the date of the executed terms and conditions, you have to submit a final budget, which has to be approved by us before costs are approved under the grant. No payments can be submitted for reimbursement without the approval of the final budget, and that is, you know, part of that onboarding process. Your eligible use of funds. Your eligible use of funds are covered in subpart 2 CFR subpart E. You all know, obviously, it's the broadband grant, so we're looking for things like your, you know, your fiber costs, your contracts, et cetera. But again, to link it back to that final budget, I know you guys submitted a budget for consideration for the award, but your costs must align to the approved final budget, right? The budget that you submit and it's approved by OPB. Those budget amendments may be submitted for consideration. However, the final budget submitted to OPB upon award must align to the scope of your original application submitted to and approved for award by the state. The most fun topic ever. Federal requirements under the uniform guidance. So recipients of 2 CPF, just like state fiscal recovery funds, must use documented procurement procedures which conform to the applicable federal laws and procurement standards covered in 2 CFR 200. Your sections are written here, and then we just kind of broken it down to the policy requirements that apply to the assistance listing. So very similar to what you see under the state fiscal recovery funds. There are different exclusions than under state fiscal recovery funds. These 3 requirements also fall under 2 CFR 200. It's the universal identifier, so your UEI number, reporting subaward and executive compensation information. If you are public in your UEI, which I'll get to in just a moment, then we will be able to see that information. And then the OMB guidelines to agencies on government-wide debarment and suspension. These are the policy requirements that are excluded under the 2 CFR 200 policy requirements under this assistance listing. So we have a couple of them that are just kind of general, but I did want to highlight at the bottom of it, there's the federal interest in property purchased or improved. Make sure you go and take a look at 300 or 200.316. That is not the same as some of the asset and ownership issues that we have been discussing under property acquisition ownership under the subrecipient or the disposition requirements under 2 CFR 200 as well. Here's just a line by line examples of the procurement standards in subpart D. Again, I'm not going to read through all of this. Essentially, make sure you're doing non-competitive procurement and documenting any instances where you've utilized a sole source that has certain requirements in there. Here, and we have this also available on our website. It's basically a short guide, to procurement. Just going through each of the thresholds for procurement, from the micro purchase all the way up to your formal procurement methods. So you have this in a table. But again, if you have any questions as you're going through this, we'd much rather you reach out and say, hey, can we schedule a meeting to discuss this? Our team, RSM, can hop on a meeting with you to kind of walk you through the documentation, kind of talk through the procurement and things like that. Before we get to the audit requirements, I know kind of the elephant in the room is probably some of the procurement issues and potential, waivers from Treasury. Currently, this is the guidance. It is still that these competitive procurement 2 CFR 200 policy requirements are in place until we see otherwise. And so until we get, written guidelines from Treasury that do waive those or give us some leeway or flexibility, this, we're kind of stuck with what we have right now. But as soon as we hear, anything changes in anything in the guidance, really, we'll post it to our website. We'll make sure that you all receive, an email blast. If there are any further, implications on the guidelines, or if there are any, flexibilities that we may be able to take advantage of. For subpart F, it's your audit requirements. Most of you are probably familiar with this if you receive federal funding, but essentially this is, non-federal entities that receive and expend $750,000 or more in federal funding have to go through a single audit, and those records have to be on file and available for auditors to be able to review from our team or the federal agency. And here's a link to the short guide on procurement. Again, it's on our 4 grantees website under the important documents. All right. So the next steps in your award process, many of you have already received the terms and condition has been sent out. Many of you have already signed it. The next step after that is making sure you have the Georgia Grants access. If you don't already have it from an existing award that you have on the broadband side and you need access, please reach out. If you did not receive the email that followed the terms and conditions, which should have been a portal invitation, if you have any issues retrieving that portal invitation at all, you can reach out to our office and we can walk you through that and make sure that you get that set up. After that is going to be and you can do these all kind of in tandem with each other, but the vendor management form, please make sure if you don't already have one on file, that is one of the process steps that takes the longest. It's essentially a two-part process. We have now changed this process, and Jonna's going to walk you through it. It was, a PDF form that you fill out and then submit to SAO, the State Accounting Office. And so we really never had visibility on when the grantees kind of sent that over to be able to assist and kind of check up on those. But SAO has been very gracious in helping us with these on top of their daily duties of pushing out the vendor forms for other folks. And so this can take, between 6 and 8 weeks to get from when you submit it. So please, if you have not already, start that process today just to get it going so that by the time you have all of these processes in place, then you're ready to go, because that does tend to be our holdup. And more often than not, we see where sometimes we have to kind of kick it back and you have to start a new form. So it's very important, as Jonna will walk through with you, that you fill it out correctly the first time so there's no error and you have to start all over. So again, this now comes to us in the electronic method. We kind of comb through it, make sure it's all good to go, and then send it over to SAO so we can kind of keep an eye on it. We can track it through the process, and then it automatically submits your vendor information into our system. So it's a bit more streamlined now, but again, make sure you start it early. And then the final budget. The UEIs, just wanted to bring this up for a couple of reasons. If you were awarded, you have a UEI, it was required through the application process. As you all may remember, in April of last year, the feds moved from a DUNS number, the Duns and Bradstreet number, and they transitioned to a UEI, a unique entity identifier. And in that transition, there was a massive delay. I mean, a couple months at a time. And we have seen some relief on that. But if you are kind of, either just starting to get the UEI or you have one that's about to be inactive, I would strongly encourage you to, again, start that now. Take a look in the system of what they require, because with that transition, and we actually experienced this ourselves, there's more requirements now because of the transitions. There's more documentation that is required than there was in previous years. So it took us quite a while to kind of get through that process too. So just wanted to pass that on. The second thing I wanted to note is Treasury does require that your UEI be public in order to validate that it's active, but also so that we can check to make sure there's no exclusions, which is a requirement on us as well. But so that's the second thing. If you don't know how to do that, if you have issues kind of figuring out if you've opted out of the public search and you don't know how to get that back again, please reach out. We are actually putting it on our website too. There's a step-by-step process, but feel free to reach out to us. We can help you walk through it. There's a lot of steps to it. It's pretty straightforward, but there are a lot of steps to it. So feel free to reach out to us. And then the third thing I wanted to note on the UEI is it must remain active throughout your award. And we are checking this. So I want to make sure that no payments are delayed because of an inactive UEI. And what that means is when you guys submit payment requests to us, we are checking again the activity, if it's active or inactive. And if you have an existing payment request and there are either exclusions or you have an inactive UEI, unfortunately, that payment has to be rejected. So we want to make sure that you guys continue to, get those payments, and those are efficiently sent out the door as well. But that UEI being inactive will definitely stop that process. And because of the delays and the extra supporting documentation that they are requiring now with this new provider that they are using, please make sure you're, staying on top of that. Terms and conditions, again, you guys have already received this. It comes from Adobe Sign at adobesign.com. If you are an awardee and you have not received this, please reach out. You have 60 days to sign this, but it does tend to get hung up in your junk boxes, and just make sure it's whitelisted, because we've seen a lot of times where the grantees can't find that. So if you haven't received it, please reach out. We can resend it and kind of help troubleshoot that, but try to make sure that your IT is whitelisting the adobesign.com domain. We have a user guide under the important document section for grantees that tell you how to delegate that. So if it comes to you and you may not be the appropriate authorized user to sign a legal agreement for the grant, you can always delegate it within the actual screen, so from the email itself. We also have a video on how to do this. This screenshot here walks you through what the email looks like, and you can see very bottom in very tiny print, it'll say delegate. So it's really easy to miss. So I wanted to highlight that for you. And as soon as you do that, you can type the person's name in. It sends it to them. And then the person getting the delegation of that can actually go in the document. It doesn't look like it's editable, but if you click on the name of the former person that had it, you can retype your name into that box. It doesn't show it here, but we have a video. Again, if you go to the 4Grantees website, there's a video under the webinar and tutorials on how to delegate the terms and conditions video. We kind of walk you through each of that and what it looks like, but it is easy to miss. Editable fields, it's pretty simple, but there's a video there. Georgia Grants portal access. Again, if you haven't retrieved that invite, or if you're having any issues, we have an instruction guide, or you can just reach out to us and we can just troubleshoot that for you. If you want to add authorized users, I would say go ahead and make sure you have those defined within your organization and you set those up, because we do require the authorized user existing in the account can go in under your organization profile and add additional authorized users. If they are unable to do that, then we require it's a form. It's called the authorized user, I think, designation form. And that has to be submitted by your organization with basically a memo on file on your letterhead indicating that now you are the new authorized user, or whomever it is. You can have different authorized users for your terms and conditions than you do on the account to be able to submit payment requests and things like that. You can also separate it too if you need a different point of contact on your quarterly reports. You can have that as well. So we just need to have those POCs on our file. All right, Jonna, I'm going to turn it over to you to walk through the vendor management process.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Good afternoon, everybody. And again, congratulations on your grant award. We are looking forward to working with all of you on the Capital Projects Fund grants. So as Jen mentioned, the vendor management process, while we have streamlined it, it does take a little bit of time. And I know some of you may already have, you may already be set up as a supplier with the state. You may already have banking information on file. If that's the case, please let us know. But if you don't, we need you to go ahead and go through this process. I just put a link in the chat box to the website, where Jen's got the website link below on the bottom of this slide. And I know for some of you who joined after Jen started, this presentation and the webinar will be posted on our website probably tomorrow, so that you will have access to all of this information and the links. But I did put a couple links in the chat box so that you could go ahead and get started on these now. And as she mentioned, I would encourage everybody to get this vendor management form submitted now. You're going to generate that from the grants portal. When you log in, there will be a link under your grant to where you can request a vendor management form, and that will take you through the entire process. Again, I would encourage you to visit the link on the website. There's a very detailed document with instructions there, with snapshots that show you exactly how to download and request that vendor management form. And it's not difficult. but it will help you. It's a very quick document that will show you step by step how to do that. Some of the things that we've noticed, we've had some establishments, and I don't know that any of you will have this issue, but some entities will submit the documents without completing the EIN number or the tax ID number or FEI number, and it'll be rejected. SAO, the State Accounting Office, has to have that on file in order to set you up as a state supplier. So make sure when you complete those vendor management forms and the W-9 that has to be included with it, that you complete those required fields. If that EIN or tax ID number is not included, it will get rejected, and that'll take more time. So make sure you're thorough and you include that. And make sure those numbers match. We've had some facilities submit a EIN number or a tax ID number on the W-9 that doesn't match what's on the vendor management form, and that's an automatic rejection that starts you over in the process. So get those submitted as soon as possible, and we will get through that process and get that completed. So again, make sure you go ahead and get that started, follow the directions that are on the website, and I think that pretty much covers everything on the vendor management side, Jen. It's all an automated process now, so there's no emailing or faxing of documents back and forth. You complete it all online in Adobe Sign. Oh, that's the other thing. As Jen mentioned on the portal invites, a lot of times those emails will get caught in your email spam or junk folders. The same is true with these vendor management forms. It's going to come back to you from Adobe Sign. So always check if you've requested the vendor management form and completed it in the system and you don't see it, you don't see it, you don't see it, check your junk folder or your spam folder on your email, because it will sometimes get caught up in that. We've had that happen a few times. And other than that, I would say that if you've submitted your form and it's been a little while and you haven't heard back, we're going to share a general grants email address at the end of this presentation that you can email to ask us, and we can check the status for you. I think that's all I've got for the vendor management side, Jen.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, and the final budget approval, I've talked through this just at a minimum. Each of you will be assigned a programmatic grant specialist to review the budget. And we can give you the email address at the end too, or David, if you have it on off the top of your head too, if you can put that in the chat for them. It's where the budgets will go to. You can send them to us too, but they ultimately have to go to the email address that David will provide. Those will be reviewed. The costs will be looked at, your cost per mile and things like that in the budget. So make sure that you're putting it in as much detail as you can. Where you have, any sort of estimates, make sure you're including those. We have a detailed budget worksheet that's on our website that you will use. There is a budget worksheet guide, and there is one specific to infrastructure. But if at any time you, again, have questions or just need further guidance, there may be, nuances to your project, feel free to reach out to us and we can sit down and talk through that with you. David, I wanted to kick it over to you. I know you guys have been providing some really great guidance on particularly the broadband and like the water sewer infrastructure type projects and the level of detail
Sure.
in which they need to break it down in.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Nice to meet everybody. For those of you that we're already working with on the broadband infrastructure program, good to see you again. I'd just highlight that the detailed budget worksheet is, as Jen mentioned, to be provided at the most granular level available to us at this point in time. We do realize that some of these projects may not have had preliminary engineering work performed, and that there may be a higher level budget, feasibility or modeling approach that entities use to come up with those original budgets. That said, we really are looking for the greatest level of detail possible. And what I mean by that is unit prices for specific units and quantities of those specific units. So if we're talking about nodes or fiber or whatever pieces of equipment, supplies, or labor that you intend to utilize in these projects, we prefer that that budget breakdown include the unit price and quantity level if it is available. As Jen mentioned, we do compare to certain benchmarks, both from our own internal program here in Georgia, but also with some metrics that RSM kind of gathers more nationally. And so if your budget happens to fall out of line with some of those metrics, we'll ask for a meeting to talk about that, or ask for you to put that in justification or like a narrative form in the budget worksheet when you resubmit that to us. So I just say all these things to try to stoke the process on your end of putting as much in there as you possibly can when you initially submit that, because we will check to make sure that it aligns with your original budget submission in the application, and we'll be checking for those risk and performance measures that I spoke to previously. So Jen, I hope that covered it, and I probably will hit it a little bit again when we get to my slides. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. Oh, this is an important one too. So for the final budgets, as David mentioned, as much detail as you can provide. If you have match funds or other funding sources, and you're providing, a cost breakdown or some kind of estimate, and you're including total project costs, we want to make sure that we're not, tracking your match funds. However, we need to be able to see what portion of whatever breakdown you're providing us is going to be paid with out of your capital projects fund, and what is not capital projects, right? So if it's your match funds. And so that may be something that they ask you for in more detail. So again, if you're providing that up front, just wanted to warn you, go ahead and, if you have something that's, I'm just throwing it out there, like $10 million on a estimate breakdown, and only $5 million of that is going to be used for the capital project funds, go ahead and make sure that's noted on whatever you turn in. And again, just to highlight the contracts and services, they are subject to 2 CFR 200 procurement requirements. If you have any issues with that, if you need to talk through any of that, just please let us know. Budget revisions. So we anticipate, obviously, costs are going to increase on you as you go. Unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity a year from now to provide you with more funding, but we know that these are going to ebb and flow, and your line items are going to ebb and flow. So we know that budget revisions are going to be necessary. A few reasons for budget revisions: maybe changes in personnel, if you have those, disengagement from the project, especially costs that require prior approval. You may have put in your budget due to some cost estimates that you needed a certain amount, and maybe that amount went down, which would be great. Maybe it went up, and you need to kind of borrow from a different line item to, rob Peter to pay Paul. So again, those are things that we expect. The budget adjustments and scope change forms and the process are also in the important document section of the For Grantees website. We have forms. If you have a scope change, you have to actually put in a budget adjustment and a scope change form, just because with a scope change usually comes a budget adjustment, right? The changes in scope, for the broadband projects in particular, the state doesn't anticipate a lot of project changes for your project. For this program, scope changes should not include location changes unless there's extenuating circumstances. We know things may happen, so while we don't anticipate them, if those happen, we need to know as soon as possible so we can kind of regroup on our end. But if you have other things that may be a change of scope and not just a budget adjustment, then you would need to fill out the change in scope form. That would be changes to the objectives, aims, or purposes, transfer of the performance of a substantial amount of the programmatic work, budget revisions that cause a project to change substantially from that which was approved. All right, so payment requests. I think this is probably one of our, other than 2 CFR 200, another one of our most discussed topics. Everyone wants to know how long it takes to get paid and what they need to do to get the reimbursements in. So on these projects, you will submit payment requests through the portal. You'll have to ensure that you have the payment template. There's a certain template that you have, and it has a checkbox if you have a modified reimbursement type of project under infrastructure. those are just really important boxes to check for us as well, because sometimes a grantee may be submitting something that they did actually pay and have supporting documentations for proof of payment. And other times, if it's under the modified reimbursement style, they would submit something where they have not submitted that and they're seeking reimbursement, but the supporting documentation wouldn't be there. So it's important for us to know on that end. You will be required to put in the supporting documentation, and that depends on the type of expense. It depends on, what you're putting in. So if you're putting in something that has a contract, with it, we would expect that you would upload that contract as well to show your procurement documentation, your grant policies, et cetera. But there is again, another short guide, for lack of a better term, on our website that has expectations for supporting documentation, and we are working on fleshing that out per program, because we do get a lot of more nuanced questions per program, particularly broadband and water and sewer. And so we hope to have that on the website really soon for you all to effectively help you guys create your checklist as you're submitting the payment requests. I wanted to highlight that on our end, we do have an SOP that we review your payment requests. We try to get them knocked out in 48 hours, and that is if, a really big if, everything is perfectly submitted. So our infrastructure projects have a lot of documentation that is usually uploaded with them. And I will say, from our experience to date, we have typically had an average time of at least a week or more on going back and forth with the grantees to obtain more supporting documentation or having conversations with them to document certain things. Having said that, after 2 weeks, if your payment request has been sitting there for 2 weeks and you've been completely non-responsive, and that again is not, we're working with you, you've been in communication, but if that goes 2 weeks with no response and it's just kind of sat there, our process is to reject it on our end and have you start all over. And that's for a couple of different reasons, but mainly because when you submit that payment request, and let's say it's for $15 million of a $20 million project, that is deducted from your total potential award amount that you have still sitting there until it's approved or rejected. And at that time, the funds open up to become free again for you to submit payment requests to. So let's say and we've seen it a lot, organizations forget or they have turnover where someone was in the middle of a payment request and it's been sitting there, and that person leaves, the other person comes in to try to request for reimbursement, and they can only request up to a certain amount. And then they reach out and say, I only have, $500 left. Why is that? So it's just easier on our end to clean slate it. After 2 weeks, that is rejected, and you guys start all over. I don't think there's anything else I was going to say on payment requests. When will you receive your payment? So that is also another one where the answer is, unfortunately, it depends. So it really depends, again, on if it's a perfectly packaged payment request submission, you have everything you need in there. Once we approve the payment, which again, we try to do in at least 48 hours, pending state holidays and things like that, obviously. But usually, as long as there's nothing, pending with your vendor form or anything like that, I would say it's 7 days to 2 weeks with a maximum of 30 days. And that is state holidays, some kind of banking routing complication or something like that. So we really see it unless, between that 2 week time frame, but we always just say 30 days to be safe. But again, that is dependent on the subrecipient providing all the documentation they need, making sure that everything reconciles to what they provided, et cetera. There is a video, a walkthrough, again, on how to submit a payment request that goes step by step. It's fairly simple. I think the most complicated thing is probably going to be your template, just because it has different tabs. All the instructions are there as well, but the video does provide a step by step on that. If you do need to change your bank account, please let us know. You will do that again through the electronic verification process. But we want to make sure you don't have a pending payment request while you're trying to update that banking information, because it won't go through. And we've seen instances where folks have tried to do that midstream with a payment request, pending, and it gets kicked back. It takes us a little bit to see that didn't go through. So that just delays your payment. So if you can avoid doing a payment request as you're trying to, shift that banking information, that's great. but at least letting us know ahead of time if you just didn't realize it or whatnot helps us kind of track your payment and make sure that we're watching that to see and then pivot whenever we get the new vendor management stuff back. Your budget categories, this is going to vary between your projects. These are the options that you have when you submit your budget. Again, a lot of you are familiar with this, but if you're not, the equipment lines, anything over 5,000 goes there, supplies under 5,000. But really, I think a lot of you are going to have it under your contracts line anyway. So if it is a contract, it goes in that line, whether it's the supplies or equipment, etc. Here's a link to the payment request template. And again, you can kind of see on this one, it's just a screenshot of the form. There are the tabs at the bottom of there in green. I can hardly see them because my screen is so small now. I've already touched on the point of contact, authorized user updates. Again, if you're an authorized user already, you can go in under your profile and add those really, really fast. If you have turnover or need to add someone outside of that, we do have a process where we have to verify you are with the organization. Your contractors, if your contractors are being paid under your grant, the POC has to be within your organization. So we can't have outside folks in your portals just because there's banking information. There's all kinds of stuff in there. I covered that. There's a link to the form, which is also on our website in the important documentation section. Reporting will mirror the quarters for State Fiscal Recovery Fund. And we do have the compliance guide for capital project funds. And so things will be a little bit different. We hope that they kind of, mirror each other, but they may vary. So please keep that in mind as you guys are filling these out. They will be sent out the same way we do now. You'll get the reporting. Whoever is the programmatic person that is designated in your application who is in the system for Georgia grants will also be designated as the POC for reporting unless you reach out to us, because we do have to change that. In the system, you'll get an email from SurveyMonkey Apply. I think it's just called Apply when they send it to you. It may look like spam. So just, again, try to whitelist anything that we have just to help. But if you don't receive your email or don't have your account set up by the first part of every quarter. So for example, January 1st, you don't see an email, you can't access SurveyMonkey Apply, please reach out to us to set up your account because everything is going to be due. I'll go back to this timeline. For January, March, it would be due April 15th. For the quarter two, it's going to be due July 15th. So we open it up the first of the month on that to give you the 2 weeks to put your information in. Quarter three is going to be due October 15th, quarter four, January 15th. We do have a very strict adherence to this policy. We just opened it up through use of SurveyMonkey Apply. So we know it's a new system, and so we kind of provided some leeway there, but we have to have this back by the 15th. Otherwise, you'll be marked as non-compliant and your account will be frozen for payment requests because we have to be able to then turn all of the information that you give us, we have to compile and then provide to Treasury by our deadline. And if we can't report it on you, we can't report you, and we have to pull you from the report. So it's a big thing. So please, please, please have it to us by the 15th. And if you don't have access and you have an award, please reach out. We can, make sure that the POC is changed. And also, the great thing about the platform we are using is it allows collaborators. So you can go in and add folks to, take portions of the report for you, and then whomever is the actual POC will then just go in and submit it. Here's a link to the compliance and reporting guide, and we'll link that again to the Capital Projects Fund webpage. Davis-Bacon, another fun one to discuss. So Davis-Bacon prevailing wage requirements do apply to projects funded with state fiscal recovery funds. I know there's discussions on, the FAQs that they have out, but they do require that we report on projects that have a total project cost of $10 million or greater to comply with the prevailing wage requirements. And so what we have done in the reporting for the Davis-Bacon is you can either certify that you comply with Davis-Bacon, or you can, if you have $10 million or more in total project costs, right? So not just what you've gotten from the state for capital project funds. Or If you don't certify for Davis-Bacon, then you can complete the alternative, which is the Project Employment and Local Impact Report. We have it. If you want to go ahead and take a look at it, we have it under the important document section. It is also linked, like when you do the report, there's a link there that you just click, download it, fill it out, and then upload it again. But this report includes the number of employees or contractors working on the project, the number of employees on the project hired directly and through a third party, the wages and benefits of workers on the project by classification, and whether those rates are less than prevailing. These are questions that I have to provide an answer to when I report in Treasury. Again, so I take all of your answers, combine them all, and then upload them for Treasury. And another fun topic. So I'm going to turn this over to David for the audit section.
Thanks, Jen. So this slide just kind of captures the objective of RSM's role in this process. So we serve as the state's monitoring function, essentially. So we partner with Jen and Jonna and their teams to provide some technical support, among other things. But our real focus is performing risk assessments at the onset of the project, performing the budget feasibility validation work that we spoke to previously. We also have folks that perform the first level review of the payment request that Jen just walked through that you'll submit. And then we also have a compliance and monitoring function on the back side of that, which essentially mimics the single audit type responsibilities that you are required to comply with in engaging a local firm to perform those compliance auditing activities. So RSM is, depending on the day of the week, either the 5th, 6th, or 7th largest firm in the world. I have been working with the state for more than a year now on this program. Am a certified public accountant, but also lean very heavily on other team members at RSM who work with the FCC, as well as a team that specializes in broadband and 5G deployment. They support us in some of the budget feasibility work as well. If we could skip to the next slide, Jen, I think this really is kind of what I wanted to focus on. So we've already talked about the budgets, completing those at the greatest level of detail possible, identifying unit prices, and then providing descriptions or narratives or supplemental schedules when that level of detail is not available. So no real need to cover that, but I'm going to drop a link in the chat that I think will help support some of the procurement and disbursement bullets that I've included in the bottom section of this slide. That really speak to the types of supporting documentation that you will be required to provide either at the first level of payment requests or as a part of our monitoring procedures that are performed really on an annual basis. As you know, the performance period for these funds extends for multiple years, and so many of these projects will overlap years, and so we have kind of a retrospective looking monitoring process each year, which may go into more detail than we go into at level 1 reviews. But to summarize this, I would say you really need to enact strong document control, document management, and document retention processes because all of the supporting documents related to any of the transactions that you enter into that are funded through CPF are required to comply with both the procurement and the cost principles included in CFR that Jen has referenced. So it's very important that when you submit a request for reimbursement, that you are providing payroll registers for internal labor, as well as invoices and other supporting documents that evidence that you have incurred costs related to the project. And in addition to that, you also have to provide proof that you've actually paid for those transactions. If you are on a modified reimbursement, method that Jen previously spoke to, there is an opportunity to provide invoices that you have incurred but not yet paid. And we can track those to make sure that before the next PA is processed, that you must submit proof of payment for all of the prior PAs. That's something that we've had to incorporate for subrecipients that may have funding challenges or smaller governments that we've worked with in other programs. And so proof of payment will be required whether at the time of reimbursement or within 30 days of that first reimbursement. I want to highlight on the procurement side of this. I know that you guys, a lot of you being for-profit entities, have different corporate structures where you may have supply companies or equipment companies that buy goods on your behalf and then essentially sell those goods to the project. I would just say that as you think through how you intend to evidence transactions with those entities, if they are wholly owned subsidiaries, if they are related companies to the prime subrecipient, those of you that are on this call, we will need to see how those contractors were procured, or how that equipment or how those supplies were procured to identify if it was done in compliance with 2 CFR 200, 318 through 320. If you visit 2 CFR 200, 320, it does explain the different types of procurement options that are available to you based on the anticipated cost or level of spend. Jen and the team has done a great job of putting resources out there at the link that Jonna provided earlier in the chat that summarize a lot of those requirements. And they're also included in that link that I just sent at a very high level. But we will expect to see solicitation packages, RFPs, RFQs, ITBs. We will expect to see, especially for those transactions in excess of $50,000, multiple quotes, and then if in excess of 250,000, public advertisement of the opportunity, a competitive process. As you read CFR, you can get a feel for how Treasury requires these purchases to be made. And we do understand and appreciate that for-profit entities may not be accustomed to some of these procedures. And so we're here to help. We want to make sure that those initial submissions are complete and accurate. And we don't want those initial submissions to take 30 days to process because supporting documentation wasn't provided. So if you want to meet in advance of a submission, we're happy to do that to make sure that we're all on the same page going into those submissions so that we can get them right, and then we can get ourselves into a regular cadence and a mutual understanding such that future requests for reimbursement go much more smoothly. But do anticipate we will be requesting additional documents. Unfortunately, it's just the nature of this process. So please don't get discouraged. Work with us on that. And we are trying to protect the state's interest here and protect your interests in this process. We all want to be deemed compliant in the event that Treasury and OIG come back and review the projects. We know a lot of these projects are over $10 million, and so they certainly are likely samples for an auditor at the federal government to come back and look at. So I hope this was helpful. I will say that in addition to kind of the blocking and tackling of procurement and disbursements, we will conduct interviews with your team members to get a better understanding of the project. We'll also interview laborers during site visits when Davis-Bacon is applicable. We will conduct site visits potentially whether Davis-Bacon is required or not, but where Davis-Bacon is required, we will conduct labor interviews to validate the compliance certifications that you provided and or the local impact reports that you're required to provide if you don't certify Davis-Bacon. So those are all things that we're happy to meet with you to talk about how we work through those issues and how we make sure that initial requests for reimbursement are compliant so that we're not volleying back and forth on the clock, if you will, once a PA is submitted. So I know that was a lot to digest there, but I hope that it was helpful in getting you started in this program, and look forward to working with each of you as we go through the process.
Perfect, thanks. So as promised, here are the additional resources. You've got the uniform guidance, you have the Capital Projects Fund program guidance. Underneath that is the reporting guidance, so you guys can go ahead and get an idea of what we will collect when the quarterly reports are due. And then I put the CFDA number, which is the assistance listing. You can go to if you want to take a look at on sam.gov for more information. I think we've encompassed all of it in here, but definitely want to just again highlight, please go and read these so you know what to expect, you know what the responsibilities are for being a subrecipient under the funds. But before I turn it over, I know Josh, Jess, you guys are also on the call. Our partners over at GTA, I would be certainly remiss if I did not bring you guys on. They're amazing and a ginormous part of this, and the reason it has been so successful on the application side. So Josh, I don't know if you have anything to add. I know we talked for a long time, but I don't know if you want to just say hey and add anything, but.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you, Jonna, and thank you so much to the RSM team. I don't have too much to add. Just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for participating in this program. It is the second one that we've run in just a little bit under a year's time, and I think that speaks to our great partners at OPB and at RSM for working with us to see this done. This is such an important initiative of the state and of the governor, and time is of the essence. So thank you so much for y'all's participation. We hope to see very successful projects that are on schedule and that are on budget. And we look forward to hopefully seeing all of y'all again for future grant programs, which will be coming down the line. Hard to believe that there's more coming, but it certainly is the case, and look forward to working with y'all. So thank you so much, Jen. Thank you, team. Thanks,
Josh. So I put on this slide, obviously you have the grants box that Jonna mentioned. If you have just general questions about vendor management forms, anything about the onboarding process, if you go to your approved award, once you log into the system, you'll see your actual program specialist that is knowledgeable in the broadband side. Jaren's name will be in there. His contact email also is in there. So if you have, broadband specific questions, Jaren's more than happy. Again, you can reach out to any of us and we'll get you where you need to be. But again, for the audit side, the budget side, if you'll email the Georgia ARPA at rsmus.com. And again, it's a team effort, so we'll get you where you need to be if you just reach out to us. But I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but we're happy to stay back and answer any questions that you may have. So just wanted to open it up to questions. Anybody? Give y'all a second to think. All right. Well, again, we'll update our website with some more program-specific FAQs. If you have any questions or concerns that you would like to see addressed in the FAQs, really anything, please reach out to us. We're here to help. I know this is all kind of red tape onboarding stuff, but again, we're here to help. We're super, super happy to be a part of this project. And thank you all for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.